Hi, everyone. This is Professor Jie Ren. Welcome to my podcast, When Tech Meets Ed. Today, I have a few guest speakers to join me to discuss this really interesting topic, which is data analytics to my heart, in the very special form of collaboration, which is between universities and government, town gown. So during this whole process, students truly get to experience the data analytics in this context of real life. And then they get to provide data-driven solutions to provide insights for government's operations, et cetera, et cetera. So let's begin. So, Will, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, hi. So, my name is Will Xiao. I serve as manager of data systems and solutions for the New York City Mayor's Office of Operations since 2015. My journey with this specific dashboard project is amazing, and it actually began before my operations journey. So when I was in the New York City Department of Environmental and Protection. So that's how it started. So originally I started as a hands-on developer for this particular project. I was a technical person, and over the last decade, I kind of evolved into managing the full data lifecycle from collection to storage, management, processing to visualization. So I stuck with this project for so long because I'm passionate about the intersection of IT and public policy. I believe the specific data set holds a key to understanding how New York City builds its future. And I love solving technical puzzles required to unlock the insight and the information.
Oh, wonderful. So this is truly amazing that you and also Terry, who will be another guest speaker for this episode, you guys truly helped us like tremendously. I'm so grateful to that, especially you in terms of explaining the definitions of data and also trying to explain the background of the entire data collection and then kind of inspiring students in terms of analysis. So I'm just curious, like, what was the motivation for the in New York City government to make the data available and publicly, like available to anyone to see as the dashboard?
Right. So I think back in 2012, the motivation evolved. It started from a compliance and then to democratization. So in 2012, we were required by First Deputy Mayor to publish the New York City's capital project, its budget and schedule to the public. And at that time, we were required to report only project size over $25 million because there are so many projects out there. And so we started with the threshold of $25 million. We published data. And then in 2020, that was key turning point. There was a local law 37 in 2020 passed by City Council that we are required to publish everything, all the capital projects of New York City. So that's how this project started. We make all the data available for all the projects. So that's original motivation and compliance. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So, from my experience interacting with time gown people and also like having like witnessing students like learning process in it, then definitely the data sets are complex and huge. So I can imagine like if I were in your shoe, right, and there could be some like data challenges that you are witnessing, and then how did you handle these data challenges when you are putting the dashboard together and then navigating through?
So back in 2012, the biggest challenge at the time was first data silo, and there's not a unified model and location to put the data together. So first data silo. At that time, every managing agency has their own system, or some agency don't require big system because they don't have that many projects. So start from there. We work with agency to build up data dictionary and to define the spec, make sure we have a universal standard. Then we centralize the location. We collect the data in the cadence like 3 times a year, and that's the first challenge. And then data model. The second challenge is data model because New York City capital projects that the budget and schedule, they are not these entities are not one-to-one relationship. For example, a set of schedule might have 5 funding code. We call that FMSID. And vice versa. You might have one set of schedule with 5 funding resources or one funding resources mapped to 5 different projects.
It's like money-to-money relationship.
Right. I think that is a fundamental data model that we implement to this project, which is quite accomplishment in terms of how to explain this data to public.
So talk about the data challenges and how you dealt with that. And I can imagine that when New York City government is running the day-to-day operations, there must be a lot of data being generated. And then how did you guys decide to prioritize what data to publish first?
So we decided we started with the threshold because the data scale was too big, and we started with the threshold of $25 million and more because that was a very labor intensive process back in 2012. So it was the 25 million was the threshold. But later, when the city council passed local law 37, there was not a choice. We just had to do the automation and do as much of automation to reduce the labor intensive process and make it the entire data set to be transparent.
Okay, there's a lot of work in it for sure. And then also you mentioned about the data challenges. And then like I can imagine because again, like through my observation and interaction with students, analyzing, trying to understand data is coming from different like managing agencies, right? And there are a lot of stakeholders involved. And then when you are building this dashboard and your people are building this dashboard, how would you ensure like data quality and then consistency, etc.?
So I think the data set has 2 major parts. One is schedule, one is budget. So in terms of budget, New York City has a great financial system. It's called FMS, Financial Management System. It has gold standard. It's accounting system. It has all the data we needed. So that part was less a challenge. So the second part, which is schedule. Because the data silo issue we just talked about, that every agency has their way making their data. So we build up ETL process. We collect data. Some agency, if they don't have system, we started with spreadsheet. So we build different customized pipeline to agency and to collect them. And of course, before that, we have to just start with data dictionary and did a lot of back and forth. So the 2 parts of the data schedule and budget and we collect both of them and we join them. We use the so-called FMS ID, which is a code for each budget line, and join with the agency schedule. That's how we put them together. Yes.
Nice. Thank you, Will. So my next question is kind of moving from the data part more towards the analysis part, because the data part is the starting point, even though there are like a lot of like challenges and et cetera, et cetera. And now let's get to the analysis part. So from your background and your experiences, your know-how, like how would you expect like individual analysts, including, for example, for them students this semester, to generate insights that could help the government? Like, have you seen any examples? And then could you please share?
Okay. So since the data set has been launched since 2023, the students in Fordham University have provided what I call a deep dive R&D research and development. So while my team in the city government is to focus on the daily operations of keeping the data flowing, and students have the time to look at the data afresh. Like, why? There are many why. Like why is data like this? How they look at it, and in a fresh view.
Yeah, I remember the engaging conversations right in class about yes. Please carry on.
Yeah. So so in a recent class, students analyzed our latest 7 reporting periods and look at the data and they actually came up with some questions in terms of how projects were delayed and made a good categorization. And I think that was something that a good finding that in class that student has started to have the insights. And I think the students build a good model as we are growing in the future, because now we only have 7 reporting period. I think this model will be very, very helpful in the future as it grows bigger. We'll be able to see some more and more insight and patterns and how this data is helping the city government to operate.
Thanks, Will. So we talk about essentially the Tangang collaboration, which is between the university and also academia, right? For students to look at the data set. But this is such a wonderful data set. It could be very much accessible. Well, it is accessible to the public. So anyone could be using their skill sets, right, to analyze the data. And then in your view, like what these skill set that they should have, technical and also analytical.
So technical wise, I think there's a hard skill, which is the requires data tools. For example, SQL database or Python. R. These are very most popular tools in the market. That's non-negotiable because
Yes.
you do need the tools to be able to handle millions of rows
Yes.
and to manipulate it, sort it,
Great.
filter it. So, but also thanks to AI, the technology today, the barrier of entrance is a lot lower than before.
Mhm.
So let's say someone never know this data tool before can easily use AI to generate a script or a SQL language for one to query or analyze the data for these big data sets. So in terms of skills, I feel like today we have very easy to start tool to use, which is AI.
Yeah.
But of course, the data tools, Python or SQL is still mandatory. That's
Yes.
my
Yes.
opinion.
Totally agreed. 100%. So maybe now let's like move to the outlook, look ahead, right? So do you have any plans in terms of, and also any vision in terms of any additional new features or new data sets that you could be including into this dashboard that is public to the audience, everyone?
Okay, so currently, I would say my top wish would be contextual interactivity. So, for example, map.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
say it in the
Interactiveness.
easy way, the map. Currently, our data set don't really have shapefile. It does have community district. It does have rural or citywide, these categories. I'm hoping in the future we'll be able to collect shapefile, which allows the audience to easily navigate and see a map and
Yeah.
how does it overlay other data, for example, crime rate or average income or
Yes.
population.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
that will be easy to really have a quick insight, more intuitive insight from the data set. So I'm hoping that's something we can work on in the future, which is the geospatial data.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's like super helpful because we know like a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So
Yeah.
definitely the more visual, the better. Also, when it comes to analysis, you could be using, like at least students are trying to do, is to use additional data sets coming from different other sources, such as like to look at like income, like how to like associate income with the data that you guys are like making available now. If you guys can like merge everything together, that'll be amazing. So we're looking forward to the effort. So I have a final question for you, which is like, in your vision, right? We know that this dashboard has been helping, at least for them students, right, to like try to generate insights for government operations. And then in your vision, like how would you think about like how this dashboard could help generate insights and also strengthen partnerships like Tangang with other universities, for example?
Okay, I think it's all about feedback and feedback loops. So we started with collecting the data and analyze data. Now we're moving beyond with students to create models that the city can adopt.
Yes.
So using this dashboard, not just report that what has happened, but measure success of new policy, creating the tighter loop between academic theory and government practice. So I would say by using this data, start with student analysis, we can tighten the gap and see how what the impact, how does data work, and the feedback for the government operations.
Yes, we are very looking forward. Like as educators, I'm very proud. Like when my students are presenting this, like their solutions, right? And from our end, we truly want to know like the feedback from the government, like from NYC government, to see, oh, did we really do a good job at like providing anything useful for the government? So thank you so much, Will, for this conversation. I truly learned a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Hi, we are going to continue our conversation. And now I'm very happy to have 3 students of mine to join me to talk about their experience at interacting with the data made publicly available by the New York City government. So Faris, why don't we start with you and introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
My name's Faris Eldahi. I'm a first semester MSBA student here at Fordham, and I'm also the president of the Fordham Business Analytics Society. I have a background in international relations, where I did my undergrad at the London School of Economics. And now I transitioned to business analytics, and I'm very happy to be here in New York, the heart of the financial sector of the world. And I'm now a part of this project dealing with the New York City project tracker data.
Yeah.
And it's been a great experience, 3 months working on it, and learned a lot, and happy to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then I'm super impressed at Faris's performance in class
Thank
and
you.
also outside the classroom for sure. And then he just joined us. So totally brand new, fresh in terms of data analysis. I know that you have some econ background, etc. And then, okay, so let's focus on this project. So what was your biggest experience coming out of this project? Could you please share? If you have to highlight one or two things.
One or two things. So coming into the project, I didn't really know what to expect, but getting the data set, it was a huge data set. And also Terry mentioned that this was the first time people were analyzing this data set.
Yes, very exciting.
And it proved that, because it was a long time cleaning the data, still cleaning the data now,
Yes,
3 months into the project.
That is true.
I learned a lot about having data organized. I think moving forward in the future, dealing with these kind of large data sets, it's very important to have data organized and structured, because having missing data that doesn't add or equal the other data sets is very challenging. And I think that's probably the main thing I'm going to be taking forward with me.
100%. It's not only specific to this context, but to all contexts of data analysis, right? Even with AI model training as well, right? With data, there's always thing about data quality. You have to cannot stress enough about data quality, and then how to organize data and etc. That part definitely takes a lot of time. And then, so let's narrow it down, because the data has 2 different parts. One is for the infrastructure, the other one is for public buildings. And I know that you are, and also your team members are in charge of the data related to public buildings, right?
Yep.
And then we also get the honor to visit one public building construction site, right? We truly I am truly grateful to New York City government's arrangement for us. So could you please share your observations and also your experiences at this on-site construction?
Yeah.
visits?
So for me, actually, the visit to the construction site was probably one of the most important things from the project, because when we're in class analyzing this data, we're only looking at a bunch of numbers, and it doesn't really tell us much. But when you go there, you can ask questions to the project managers, which we did. He explained, for example, the reason for delay. There was in a project a waterproof generator that wasn't part of the scope, and that caused delay, but that wasn't recorded in the data. So it really gave us a better understanding also of the scheduling, because they're there, we could see what schedule they're in and how much work goes into that schedule. So I think the visit really helped us also now with creating the variables. It was a big factor of why we could pick the variables we have in the questions we're doing now for the presentation.
Oh, that's amazing. Definitely. We need that domain knowledge, right?
Exactly.
And yes, about the operation situations, right, of the government. And then, okay, I have 2 more questions for you. So the next question is, we know from our end, right, from the students' end, trying to understand, right, the domain knowledge and then the context in order to come up with questions, right, to address. And then could you please elaborate on that whole process of ideation?
Yeah. So when we started looking at what questions to ask and to analyze, I was looking at it as a story. I wanted to look at the project that it's a story, and I'm explaining a story to the government and the New York City mayor's office, and basically also thinking in their perspective, what kind of variables and insight do they need moving forward? So yeah, looking into the data, we broke it up into 3 or 4 different categories. We did the textual data, so that's all the project related data, the description, the agency related to each project, and then also the second category, which was all the dates, so the scheduling, and also we divided into the money, so that's all the budgeting and the variance, and I think that really helped us break down what questions we wanted to analyze. And yeah, we were able to deduce roughly 30 questions to ask, and I think we're going to have a good presentation then.
Yeah, like I'm also looking forward to your wonderful presentation. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. All right, so last question for you is truly, right? You have been working with the data, trying to understand the government's operations for almost 1 semester. So what have you learned there? Like, what's your understanding of the government's operations and any insight that it could provide for them?
Yeah. So going in, I didn't know it was so complex. The amount of agencies that are involved and also the communication that's needed between projects, because projects are divided between managing and sponsor agency. And a lot of the time, these aren't the same agency.
Yeah.
So it was much more complex than I imagined. And a lot of different variables go into it. And I can imagine Will talked about, because he's the one who came up with the data.
100%.
So he
He's
must
our
have had
data person. Yes.
he had a lot of work to put all this data together,
Yeah,
and like
tremendous.
also has to relay back to these agencies to talk about missing data, for example.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a much more complex than I imagined starting off.
Yeah, I'm sure that you learned a lot this semester.
I
Right?
learned a lot, and I think this was very valuable. I was actually talking to some of my friends, and
great.
I said, like, the classes are, of course, amazing, and like the professors teach me a lot, but I feel like being hands-on and dealing with this project like it's a internship really gave you a different perspective of how you need to act and what is expected from you. One thing I think that also I forgot to mention that moving forward is going to be really important for me is meeting deadlines and listening to all the instructions that are given to you.
Yeah.
Because now this was a much more like real world experience.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely helped me a lot for when I start my work.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So I actually asked Will this question, like what type of skill sets, right? And in his view could be essential to analysts, right? Analyzing any data, including the publicly available data. So, and he focused very much on the technical part, but I totally agree with you that social skills do matter, especially at the real world context.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, Faris, for
Thank
your
you for having
insights.
me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's continue the conversation in terms of analyzing data for this special type of constructions, which is public building. So here I have another student of mine that I'm so proud of. He's Kamru from the second year MSBA program. So Kamru, please introduce yourself.
My name is Kamrul Islam. So I'm pursuing MS in Business Analytics. This is my final year. This year, end of this year, I will going to be graduated.
We'll be missing you for sure. We will be like missing you since like you are graduating.
I also
definitely
miss
you are like around. I hope that you'll be around, right?
Yeah, I also miss the programs. I like my faculties, and also the campus as well.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So at the same time that you are helping with me, right, to run the MSBA program, I'm like very grateful for that.
Thank you.
And then so I just talked to Faris, right, who is the first year student. And then I know that you and also Faris, you are on the team, you are in the team for the like in charge of the data related to public buildings, right? So I truly want to hear from your insights, given that you are the second year student, right? In terms of technical stuff, you are like more experienced. So So what technical and analytical skills that you use and your team used in order to tackle the data set that could be quite complex?
Okay, so for the NYC Capital Project dataset, there was a 4 dataset. So at initially when I was discussing with the Paris like facing a problem to merge the 4 dataset in the combining one dataset. So initially I used the SQL like find out the one variable for figure like as an identifier, primary key. So then once we selected that, how many variables left. So one by one, we just classify from each data set and then separated the identifier, key identifier, unique identifier, and then put in an Excel using the Excel and also simultaneously the Python as well.
Very important.
So yeah, so like we call the data, so 4 data set in a Pythons using a lot of Python libraries like NumPy, Pandas for the data cleaning and data processing. So and then like once the data set was merged and like try to like resolutions to share with the Terry's, and Terry gave the feedback. Did we appropriately merge the data or not? And then she gave a feedback about the some of the data set was not a FMS ID, like key identifier, and also the fee IDs is missing.
Yeah, there
And
could be some
then-
data challenges, right?
Yeah.
100%, like for any projects,
Right.
of course.
So then like, okay, this not make sense because every data has to be a primary key identifier like
Yes.
FMS ID and fee ID. So then, and we also start working on that, and finally, like more than 80 or 98% are accurate. Like all cover the FMS ID and fee IDs, and rest of those, she said, like put in a separate data sheet. So we separate it. And Faris also help, and other teams like my Asterisk.
They
also help
I know,
a
like
lot,
the
I mean.
entire team.
Yeah, I
100%,
think
yes.
just I appreciated their energies.
Yeah, exactly.
So then the next challenge was like very complicated, like classify the public buildings or infrastructures.
Oh, yeah, the typology.
Yeah, the
like
typology part.
classification, yeah.
Yeah. So like
That needs domain knowledge, by the way.
yeah, right.
Terry helped a lot.
Right.
For sure.
Domain knowledge. Yeah. So like Terry gave like a classification part. I forgot this name of the part. The doc sheet. But it was said like if DDC managed by the DCAS is gonna be public buildings, or DOT gonna be infrastructure. So there was a writing talks. So she gave it like 2 weeks, and I thought that okay, how can I do that? Like 2 weeks it's still a time. Like it's not not make sense as a we know this machine learning, we know this NLP stuff.
Yeah.
Why are we wasting a time?
Yeah.
And then I like feature extractions. I did a feature extractions.
Yes.
Like one side is the managing agency, another side is the sponsor agency. If this kind of managing agency is sponsored by this kind of managing agency, then it's gonna be a fee or infrastructure.
Yeah.
If not, some things like relate with the project descriptions, what the project description is.
Yeah.
So initially we put in Pythons and using all of the coding stuff one by one. So from the descriptions, we put in a NLP stuff, all of this NLP algorithms, and then they classify public buildings and infrastructure, like more than 40 or 60 feature for public building, 35 or 36 are for infrastructures. And then the code again, like just a commanding, if follow this kind of feature, then it's going to be a public building. If you follow this kind of, okay.
Yeah, so the classification.
Yeah, the mostly focus on the classifications, and yeah.
And how long did that take? It's not two weeks.
not 2 weeks, like 3 days.
Yeah, right. So that's the beauty of like exactly machine learning in terms of like that definitely could like shorten the entire process, which I'm like very so proud to see, my students are able to pull this off, right? So that definitely has like shortened the whole process. All right. So we talk about the technical stuff. And then also like if now like thinking again like about the entire process, and then do you think that the data itself could inspire you and also your team to come up with questions? Because you have the different columns of the data, they represent different entities. Do you think that part could like inspire you in terms of your ideation? Like how did you come up with these questions?
Okay, so actually this data is very interesting, but like I always try to to make my task very easy way or more flexible way. Like before anything I do, I think about more than 5 minutes. Like brainstorming. Okay,
that's so important
create a
because
roadmap.
like you have to think further in order to make sure the plan is okay.
Right.
To move on.
Right. So like here is my starting point. Here is my output. So which way we have to go and which kind of, and the reinforcement model. Like here is a like obstacle and go again the starting point and make a solutions and go again.
Yeah.
So we apply that formulas. So in the data set, we face problems like after the classifications, especially the typologies.
Yes.
Yeah. So like there are so many missing values, especially the constructions part and design part, pre-design part, and also forecast comprehensions and also actual date start. So the variations of actually the date. So I asked the Paris, do you know that how to figure out it? And also so and also Amoga also figured out some things, and once she gave some of the part to analyze and identify the new variables, get back to me, and then Faris also. So we combine it with each other and always try to keep touch with each other, make a group chat and everything stuff. And at the end we finally did that's a great experience. And I love that. Very interesting. So many variables. So many, I mean, more than 100K data.
Wow. Yeah. We know, like it's very complex.
37 variables. So it's too much.
Yeah. It's a real life context. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's very true. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kamru, for the wonderful insights about the technical stuff and also your understanding and then your ability to address this data set to generate insights. I'm so looking forward to your final presentation in the City Hall, right? Next week. So like, I'm so proud. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Hi, we will continue our conversation, but this time I want to talk about the other type of constructions, which is infrastructure. And then I have a student of mine who is also in the first year of the MSBA program, Amoga, who is part of the team in charge of this project related to this type of data. So Amoga, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me, Professor Ren. My name is Amoga and I'm from India. I'm a graduate student in FODAM for Masters in Business Analytics. And my background is computer science engineering. I've done that in undergraduate, but I wanted to explore how does that really work on real like data sets like business, or now that we're working on a public sector data set. So that's really nice. And about me, I've really been like eager to learn about how data can really give you business decisions. So I think that's something that I really like. And I'm also in FODAM, there's been like really good opportunities being this. And then I'm also representing the FODAM Business Analytics Society. So I'm really excited to be here today.
So nice to have you today. So I truly want to get your insights in terms of your understanding of the data representing infrastructure. Faris, right, and also Kamru talk about the other type of constructions, which is public buildings. Okay. And then you guys are, for the whole semester, right, trying to understand infrastructures in New York City. could you please start with that? Like what the data is like regarding the infrastructure? And we know that there is an on-site visit,
Yes.
right, about the construction site related to infrastructure. Could you please like talk about both?
Okay, yes. So firstly, the infrastructure data set is quite like most of the data is the data columns are similar, but to figure out what that means is a little different from public buildings. Because when you see public building, it's like you can see it. There's a horizontal base, and then it just goes upon
It's
like
vertical.
Yeah. But in infrastructure, most of it is like underground, or you can't see it. So that's, and like people around that are walking, and there's like daily activities going on over there. So it it can get like really difficult to do that, I guess.
Yeah.
But infrastructure projects have been really good, and the exposure is really good. We in this data set, we also tried to see if there's any correlations between like this the area and the budget, and we checked that there was nothing like that, because each infrastructure project is different. For example, when we went to the site visit, the wire site visit over there, we saw that they're taking wires from underground, because in Manhattan, there's like really high rise buildings.
Yeah.
So you can't really take it from on top and go. So they were trying to put it from underground, and they had like a lot of, they had to consider a lot of things. Firstly, about how, there'll be daily transportation going on over there, about that. And then about the people, and then the telephone agencies. There was a lot of things to consider. So I think it's really different from public buildings. Having said that, I wouldn't say that this is difficult or that is easy, but
exactly. They all have their
Yes.
uniqueness. That's for sure.
So in the site visit, I think it was really good, because we went there, and then they showed us the site first, and then we were like, okay, we were working on this data, and now I see it right here.
Yeah.
And then that was really fascinating. And then they told us, we also asked them questions. So we were like, do you think that like this is something that can be a reason to predict delay? Like we were like, okay, so we have a predictive analysis. We want to predict how if a project will be delayed or not. So we can ask them, like, is this any of the factors? Like maybe the agency is not responding, or the contractors, something has changed, or there are like weather conditions or like environmental things that we have to take into impact, because everything is going underground and you can't really see it. So yeah.
So I'm so glad that you mentioned that you guys are working on the analysis, right? That has like two parts. One is descriptive, the other one is predictive, right? And you also mentioned the predictive analysis
Yes.
that you do. So could you please elaborate on that, like how
Yes.
you do these forecasting models?
Okay. So for descriptive, firstly, we take the count of each and everything, so that we have the base data set up. Like we can, for example, see the unique projects, which comes from the unique identifier. Like we take the FMS ID, we take the PID, and then we take the reporting period, and then we get each unique project. So we get things like that in the descriptive analysis, and the typologies, because we recently made typologies as a new column into the data set, which was really nice. With Will
Thanks to
and Terry's
Perry
help. Yes.
for help. Super.
Yes, they helped a lot. So in that, Terry told us that which particular projects would go to which particular typologies.
Yes.
So in that, I performed a feature engineering on the data set using Python, and then we tried to put these. We searched for keywords, and it was like if there was anything which had street or road, it would become a road work project. And if there was something else, like if there was parks, that would become parkland infra, because most of the infrastructure projects are park projects. So we had many of these like this. All of this was part of the descriptive analysis. Coming to the predictive analysis, we want to predict if a particular project is in the risk of falling into delay. So we take many factors into consideration. First thing is looking at the past history of it. But having said that, we have limited reporting periods. But that was I don't think that was a constraint. I liked that we worked with what we had. So that we checked the delay with that. And then there was also how which top features are influencing that delay. Like, for example, is it like budget? Is it like the area? What is it? Is it the borough? Is it the density? So that was really nice. And that is the predictive analysis that we worked on.
Yeah, I'm like so looking forward to your
Yes.
presentation in the City Hall next week about that. So we talk about the data analysis, right? Predicting model, and also the data complexity, right? And also you and also Faris and also Kamru all have agreed, right, on this. And then, so now the question is that it's kind of like students are trying to understand the background, the context of the operations, and in order to ask questions. So how did that process go for you?
I think firstly, when the data set came to us, it was very raw and we had to do a lot of pre-processing on it. And I would like to say that we learned a lot from that pre-processing about the data more than doing the analysis. Because by the time we came to the analysis, we had almost like understood what is happening in the data.
Yes, not easy.
Yes, it was like that. And I think how we came up with the questions was our first basic question when we saw the data was like, okay, what can be our unique identifier such that it can count how many unique projects are there? And then moving on, we went more to like, okay, how many sponsor agencies are there and which sponsor agencies go for which type of projects and which boroughs. So we went more into deep after each review of the data set. And then we started cleaning the data set simultaneously. And we after that we went into the predictive analysis, descriptive analysis, everything. The questions that we came up with, I think it just came out naturally. We just kept asking Terry and Will after every week, like, okay, I don't know, like, how is this coming? Is borough related to like the delay, or is it related to the payment? Like, how is it happening? The budget variance, where does that come from? And then we tried to make many more columns. We created new variables, which was like one, if it's like maybe the total spend by, we found the percentage of it or things like that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. These are like a wonderful, like sharing with all the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Absolutely.